Thank you very much. It is a joy to be with you tonight. This is my last talk on my trip of Australia. It is my last talk of my entire school year of speaking before my summer starts. It's the 50th anniversary of Humana Vitae, and today is the birthday of my hero, St. John Paul II. So it is a happy day, and I'm glad to be with you tonight. So thank you for coming. Now, just so I can have a feel of you, how many of you are uni students right now? Just so I can have a general idea. Okay, how many of you out of college, young adult singles? Got a couple of those. And any married couples in the house? Oh, you got some married couples? Thank you guys for coming. I knew of one married couple. I guess they were having trouble, and they go to counseling, and the wife starts off, and she says, my husband here, he's not as affectionate as he used to be. He's not as thoughtful. He's not as romantic. And the husband just rolls his eyes. Now, the counselor got a feel for what was going on, so he got up from behind his desk, and he walked to where the wife was. And he took the wife in his arms, and he gave her a long, passionate kiss. And then he sat her down and went back to his desk. And then he said to the husband, now this is what your wife needs about 3 times a week. And the husband said, okay, I can bring her here on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So a little misunderstanding here with intimacy. And I think our culture has many misunderstandings when it comes to intimacy. And I think the real cause of that is because we don't really think about sex, especially young people, especially college students, especially college guys, university guys almost never think about sex, right? I mean, we talk about it, joke about it, watch it on the phones, but how often do we actually stop and think about it? What is the purpose and the meaning of my human sexuality? So often I think the church's teaching is just dismissed as some list of boring prohibitions. In fact, I saw this greeting card at the store. It caught my eye. It had 3 little old nuns on the front of it, and it says, on your birthday, remember our motto, if it feels good, don't do it. Now, unfortunately, this is pretty much what the general population sees as the church's teachings on sexuality. It's one gigantic no. That's basically what the church has to say. But is this true? I want to challenge this notion because studies have been coming out showing some things like this. Number one, married couples who pray together in their marriage are 90% more likely to report higher levels of sexual satisfaction. Couples who pray together are twice as likely to describe their marriages as being highly romantic. This caught the headlines of USA Today, the major newspaper, and it said, aha, call it the revenge of the church ladies. Now, I don't know if you remember that Saturday Night Live skit about 20 years ago with Dana Carvey, could it be Satan, and isn't that special? And that's what they're playing off here. And they said, Sigmund Freud said they suffer from an obsessional neurosis accompanied by guilt, suppressed emotions, and repressed sexuality. Former Saturday Night Live comedian Dana Carvey satirized them as uptight prudes who believe sex is downright dirty. But several major research studies shows that church ladies and the men who sleep with them are among the most sexually satisfied people on the face of the earth. Now, isn't that special? I think it is. And so what is it what's the ingredient going on there where they're having this more satisfaction? What is it that they understand that sometimes the world forgets? Well, what is God's plan for human sexuality? What is the very purpose and meaning of the gift of sex? Well, the purpose is simple enough, babies and bonding. The meaning, I think, it can go even deeper. The meaning of sex in the eyes of the church is that it is our wedding vows made flesh. That when a husband and a wife make their promises at the altar, they ask, do you come here today freely, without reservation, to give yourselves to one? Yes. Will you be faithful? Yes. Will you welcome children? Yes. Your love, you promise, is free, total, faithful, and open to life, ordered towards procreation. And then you leave the church, you enter the sanctuary of your bedroom, and on your wedding night, you speak the wedding vows, not with your words, but with your body. I give my body to you tonight freely. I'm not coercing you, I'm not manipulating you, I'm not pressuring you, I'm certainly not paying you. This is a free gift of self. It is total. I hold back nothing from you, not even my fatherhood. It is a faithful gift, and not just with my body, but with my imagination as well. And it's a fruitful gift. It's open to this gift of life. And so the wedding vows are being made flesh. Now, one flesh is not some biblical metaphor. In fact, an interesting study came out recently where they noticed that some women have Y chromosomes in their body. And that's the male chromosome. So the doctors started digging, where's this coming from? And they found, aha, look, a woman who has been pregnant with a son has Y chromosomes in her body. Why? Because when a baby is in the womb of a mother, the blood cells of the mother pass through the placental arrangement and they enter into the bloodstream of the mother. You can take blood from a pregnant mom, sift through her blood cells, and find the blood cells of her unborn baby living in her bloodstream. Now, when scientists were discovering this, they also found, look in the bloodstream of a mom, and you will find the blood cells of the children that the mother had given birth to 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, still living and replicating within the body of the mother. And so they said, okay, that's one way. She had a son. That's how it got in her bloodstream. They also found women who were twins in utero with a brother also have the Y chromosome because his blood cells went into the mother and down through the placenta and into her body. And they're like, this is fascinating. They continue digging, and they realized, well, some of these women are having Y chromosomes, and they had a miscarriage or an abortion, and that life of that child still stayed within them. But I thought what was most interesting is they also found that some of these women were not a child with a twin who was a male. They did not have a male son of their own. And they realized that where this appears to be coming from is sexual intercourse. And this article said, this means that through intercourse alone, there is a potential for women to hold onto the male genes and DNA within their organs and bloodstream for their entire life. One flesh is not a biblical metaphor. This is a biological reality. And God's plan for human sexuality is essentially to reveal his love for us. Now, what does this mean? Once I was looking up online what Jewish engagements and betrothals were back in the Old Testament. Apparently, at the time of Christ, when a man would propose in the Jewish custom to his bride, he would do so with a glass of wine underneath the huppah, which is a canopy, and he would propose to her with a glass of wine. If she said yes, she would drink the wine as a sign of their entering into this covenant together. And then he would leave her with gifts, and he would tell her, now I'm going away. I'm going away to my father's house to prepare a place for us. And so he would leave and go to the house of the father to get a place for he and his bride. Now, he was not in charge of his wedding date. No, the father of the bride would decide when the wedding would happen, when he thought the arrangements had been ready for the bride. And so if someone asked the groom when is the wedding date, he would have to say, I do not know. Only the father knows the day and the hour. And it could happen at any time. In the middle of the night, they could announce the wedding feast. And the best man of the groom would blow a shofar, which is the horn of a ram. And the bridesmaids had to be ready. They had to have their oil and their lamps lit. Everything had to be ready to begin the wedding feast. And so the bride, to get ready, would take a nuptial bath. She would take a bath with fragrant aromas and spices to prepare and to be as beautiful as possible. Now, hopefully the groom would take a bath as well. I'm sure she'd appreciate that, but historical details are sparse there. But this woman would take this nuptial bath to prepare to become one flesh with her groom, and then on the wedding day, they would consummate this union in this bliss of ecstatic, loving union. And do you know what I just said to you? I just gave you the entire public ministry of Jesus Christ. You read all of his parables. The Jews would have understood all of this. When we read the scriptures, it goes straight over our heads that God is proposing to us. And when a man and a wife love each other as they ought to do, they become a very image of God's love himself. Now, unfortunately, our world has basically taken this free, total, faithful, fruitful love and flipped it completely upside down. Is love really free nowadays? No. It's demanded in sexual abuse. It's paid for in prostitution. Is it total? No. It's friends with benefits, hooking up. Is it faithful? No. It's adulterous, broken marriages. Is it fruitful? No. It's sterilized, contracepted, and aborted. The whole wedding vows have now been inverted, and we wonder why nobody's satisfied. And so what we're left with is Cosmo magazine saying, well, here's 500 sexual techniques to thrill a man. Here's 100 secrets that are hot in the bedroom. You know what it feels like? It feels like they're trying to make up with techniques what they're lacking in substance. Here's some more tips. We'll try this. We'll try that. Peter Crave, the philosopher, said this. He said, have you noticed people only buy a book on plumbing when their pipes are broken? I think if we're honest, culturally, sexually, folks, the pipes are broken. It's a mess when it comes to dating, sex, marriage, gender, family. Everything is more confusing, I think, than ever. Just look at the dating scene right now. There's an article that came out recently, and it was called Tinder and the Dawn of the Dating Apocalypse. What they found is that essentially Tinder is annihilating dating. And so what they did is they asked women, single women in the culture, how's dating going now? How's the single life treating you? Listen to what the women said. One woman said, you know what? It is rare for a woman of our generation to meet a man who treats her like a priority instead of just an option. Another girl said, look, there's no dating. There's no relationships. They're rare. Yeah, you could have a fling that could last 7 or 8 months and never actually call someone your boyfriend. Hooking up is a lot easier. No one gets hurt. Well, not on the surface. And it says it's a contest to see who cares less. And guys win a lot at caring less. But she said if you say any of this out loud, it's like, oh, you're weak, you're not independent. You somehow missed the whole memo about third wave feminism. Something's off. I had mentioned last night to the young adults I spoke to that we live in a culture right now of single people who act like they're dating. We have a culture of dating people who behave like they're married, and we have a culture of married people who seem to think that they're single. Like, everything is out of order. And, we live in a culture where more people hook up than even hold hands. And we manage to do all of this without anyone asking anybody on a date. I mean, it is chaos right now. Not just with dating, but sexuality is chaos. I mean, it's becoming more and more artificial. In terms of the pornography, there's one of the most popular porn websites in the States releases every year their annual statistics. Last year, they said, in 1 year alone, last year, on their website, people spent a total of 4.5 billion hours watching pornography on their one site alone. Do the math. It's 500,000 years of human life consumed in isolation, of having some erotic moment with a laptop. 500,000 years of human life gone from one site in 1 year, let alone the other tens of millions of sites that are out there with this content. In Japan, virtual reality porn is taking off, where they're wearing the goggles. It's become such a hit that they actually did an interview of Japanese men, and 40% of them, in this one interview, said that they were not interested in a sexual relationship with an actual woman because the VR porn is just more satisfying. Because then I don't have to worry about needs and rejection and performance and emotions and all that stuff. No, I can just put on the goggles, and when I'm done, I don't have to answer to anybody. But 40% of the men didn't even want a real relationship. Some people now, have you seen in technology, they're trying to invent sex robots because we know we're made for communion, but in this world that's become so confusing, we don't know where to find that real union. Gender is getting more confusing than any time ever. I was at World Youth Day in Poland, and one of the girls on her pilgrimages, we're at the papal vigil, pulls out her cell phone. She said, look, I'm going to Stanford University next year. I have to pick my gender to get into Stanford. Look. And she starts scrolling through the genders. She said 18 genders to pick from. And look, male and female aren't even options on the list. Facebook has 58 genders now. Facebook in the UK, 71 genders. You could be gender nonconforming, intersex, non-binary, transmasculine, two-spirit, cisgender, transmasculine male. What is going on? I had enough of an identity crisis growing up when there were 2 to pick from, and now we're looking at 71. And this is not to make light of a serious topic of gender dysphoria, for which these people deserve compassion and love and respect, but the culture's just gone chaos. Now, where is this coming from? You know why this has happened? Vatican II told us. And Gaudium et Spes said, when God is forgotten, the creature itself grows unintelligible. And this is what's happening to man. And so the family's becoming unintelligible. Well, 2 men, 2 women, a woman and a man, does it really make a difference? For the first time in history, we are biologically engineering motherless children. We've never tried this social experiment before, and I promise it will not go over well because a mom can't be swapped out with a dad. And people can accuse me all day long of being a hateful, homophobic bigot, but the fact is, no man on earth could take the place of my wife. I'm telling you, an army of 1,000 men could not take the place of my wife. Not just emotionally to the kids, but biologically. I mean, check this out. When a woman is breastfeeding, okay, the infant will backwash some saliva into the woman's breast. Now, the woman's breast tissue will be able to detect immediately if that child has any type of illness, a bacterial infection, a viral issue, and the woman's breast tissue will trigger an immediate immunological response. And what will happen is she will concoct a very specific formula of white blood cells tailor-made to heal this particular illness. If you pump breast milk from a mother when her child is healthy versus when the same child is sick, the breast milk visibly looks different. The one while the baby is ill looks very similar to colostrum. Now, this is the breast milk that is given to a baby immediately after birth, which is packed and loaded with white blood cells. And so when the baby's sick, he's gulping down literally. Now, this is coming from the university here in Australia, in Western Australia. What they noted was this. The leukocyte blast, this is the University of Western Australia, the leukocyte blast contains a mix of specialized cells that move from milk into the baby's body. Some of these cells fight pathogens directly by gobbling them up and producing antibodies. Other cells come, get this, pre-programmed to fight germs that the mother has previously tangled with, transferring a memory that helps the baby's immune system get established. One of the articles said, so you know what, women? Next time anyone shames you for breastfeeding in public, you tell them you're performing a diagnostic test. So this cannot be replicated. And so, but you just can't swap them out. And so all of this confusion with gender, sexuality, marriage, family, all of this stuff, where is this all coming from? To me, these are like fruits off of a tree, but we need to get down to the root of where this came from. The root of where this all came from is contraception. Now, why would I pin all of these sociological things on the condom or on birth control pills? Well, this is not my theory. In fact, there is a little sociological journal that came out where they studied the hookup culture on college campuses in America, on universities. And it was this big study, and they wanted to tackle it from a perspective of evolutionary biology. And what the scientists said is this, that in the animal kingdom, male and female species have different reproductive rates, meaning through one act of intercourse, how much of your life could be invested because of that. They said in the human species, the male has a very small reproductive rate. What meaning an act of intercourse could invest maybe a couple of minutes of his life, and that's it. Whereas for the woman in the human species, her reproductive rate is much, much longer. One act of intercourse could mean a year plus of her life, of gestation and lactation, of taking care of this child. They said as a result, typically the gender that has the longer reproductive rate is much more choosy in selecting a spouse. This is why women typically had been more picky when it comes to mate selection and intercourse. But what they noted is with the advent of contraception, you ended up giving an entire civilization of women the reproductive rate of men. You evened the entire playing field. And as a result, we have this eruption of the hookups because the women became less and less choosy. And it became almost irrelevant whether it was two men or two women or a woman and a man because they have the identical reproductive rate. Now, these are not religious sources, but the fact is, if we really honestly look at things, things are broken right now. And contraception, we were promised, oh, well, contraception, it's safe, it's reliable, if it's effective, it's scientific, it's responsible, and it's going to give you greater intimacy, greater control of your sex life, more sexual liberation. It's going to lower the rates of HIV. It's going to lower the rates of unwanted pregnancy. Abortion is going to go down. All these promises of everything that was going to become better, and every one of those promises became false. And people say, well, I mean, what's the alternative? What are you going to use? Natural family planning? Are you going to use the calendar rhythm method? Oh, that's real good. Calendar rhythm method had a huge failure rate, okay? It's about 30% failure rate. Now, I'm a pretty big fan of that because my parents tried it and it didn't work, and I'm right here today. So that's a pretty good deal. But if I want to plan my family, we do use what's called natural family planning. NFP, now this is according to the British Medical Journal, is more than 99% effective. Unfortunately, so many young couples never even learn about this as an option, other than their gynecologist telling you, oh, well, that doesn't work, but it does. In fact, I give talks to engaged couples in the Diocese of San Diego. Diocese gives them the survey before my talk to kind of see what they know about NFP. So they gave these surveys out. This 26-year-old woman was asked, in one sentence, define natural family planning. She said, oh, that's a way to have sex that meets church requirements. Now, doesn't that sound like fun? But this is this is literally all that she knew. Oh, that's that Vatican roulette thing. And then they asked another woman, in one sentence, define natural family planning. She said, oh, that's a planning method that is very old-fashioned. You really want an old-fashioned family planning method? I got one for you. It's called contraception. Contraception is more than 4,000 years old. We have Egyptian papyrus dating back to about 1850 BC. And what would they do for contraception? Oh, they would just insert crocodile dung into the woman's reproductive tract. And if you think that's a little barbaric, well, as the ages went on, they would give women potions of sterility to swallow. They would fumigate her uterus with smoke to keep any conceptions from happening. They would bind her uterus tightly to expel any conceived children. At the time of Christ, we have the ancient writings of a Roman gynecologist named Cyrannus of Ephesus. And we have in his writings more than 40 spermicidal concoctions that he had come up with. Now, all the early Christians and church fathers were completely opposed to contraception, just as the Jews were at that time. Now, as the ages went on, we got to the Middle Ages, and they started having more oral contraceptives, where they would have women swallow potions of sterility that would contain things like lead, mercury, arsenic, and strychnine, which work very well because if she's dead, there's no more pregnancies. And so, also, during the Middle Ages, they began to have more superstitious ways to ward off pregnancy. In the Middle Ages, women would wear amulets around their neck that would ward off pregnancy. Some of these amulets would contain the liver of a cat or the earwax of a mule. Now, personally, I think that would be a pretty good deterrent, because if you're wearing cat liver, I mean, it's not happening. But what was going on? They tried all these different things. Now, the Protestant reformers were unanimously against this. If you've ever read what the Protestants said on this stuff, Martin Luther said the sin of Onan in the Old Testament, of withdrawal, he said this exceedingly foul deed of Onan, the basest of wretches, is a most disgraceful sin. It's more atrocious than incest, than adultery. It's a sodomistic sin. This is Martin Luther against contraception. John Calvin called it a monstrous thing. John Wesley said it is evidence of vile affections. Those who commit the sin of Onan displease the Lord, destroy their own souls. Now, what's interesting is this is more vehement than any Catholic homily you'll ever hear, and these are the Protestant reformers speaking out against this. Now, moving on in the timeline, you get to the 1800s. Now, in the 1800s, they invented the vasectomy. The British Medical Journal at the time said that vasectomies should be given to people, now quote, this is the British Medical Journal, vasectomies are for delinquents, morons, drug addicts, and idiots. This is the British Medical Journal at the time, what that was intended for. Now, move the timeline along, and we now get to the 1930s. If you were to open a Cosmo magazine back in the 1930s, they actually recommended to you women that you use Lysol and athlete's foot medicine in your body as a form of contraceptive. And if you think that's a little barbaric, well, look at the ingredients of today's spermicides. It's the same stuff used in household cleaners and laundry detergent. And the timeline went on. We're now in the 1930s, and the Anglican Church in the 20s said, we are not in favor of contraception. But by 1930, the Protestants changed their tune on this. At least the Anglicans did, and they said, in some instances, a married couple could use contraceptives. Now, did the Protestants all agree? Absolutely not. The Lutherans, the Episcopals, the Baptists, everybody spoke out against this, saying things like, these are the Lutherans. Birth control is the most repugnant of modern aberrations, representing a 20th century renewal of pagan bankruptcy. The Episcopal Church called the whole birth control movement, the whole disgusting birth control movement rests on the assumptions of man's sameness with the animals. The Baptists said that this will prove seriously detrimental to the morals of the entire nation. And it wasn't just the Protestants. Mohammed Gandhi said this: man has sufficiently degraded women for his lust, and contraception, no matter how well-meaning the advocates may be, will still further degrade her. Self-indulgence with contraceptives may prevent the coming of children, but will sap the vitality both of men and women, perhaps more of men than of women. And so we have across the board, everyone speaking out. But within a few decades, all of the Protestant churches had caved in on this. And in the 1950s now, we have the invention of the birth control pill for both men and women. That's right. The male birth control pill was invented when the female pill was invented. They tested both pills on poor people in the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, because there the women aren't going to sue the pharmaceutical companies. They don't have enough money to hire some high-power attorney. So they tested the male pill and the female birth control pill. The men they tested on had a slight shrinkage in their testes. So the guys were like, no pill for me, no thank you. What happened to the women they tested on? Oh, 3 of them died. So they adjusted the dosage and kept testing on the women. Today, virtually every form of hormonal contraception for women exists for men. The pill, the patch, the shot, the implant, gels, all kinds of hormonal contraceptives have been invented that work for men. Pharmaceutical companies had said they do not plan to bring these things to the public for a couple of reasons. One, men aren't going to take it. Well, you let her take that stuff. And also because men will be much more aggressive in litigation against pharmaceutical companies when we start suffering the side effects that women have been suffering for decades. And so with the birth control pill, when they're inventing it, they never told the women how the things actually work. I would say of all the women I meet on contraceptives, I don't know that I've ever met one who actually knows how it's really functioning. Now, when the pill was invented, one of the main doctors who invented it was a Catholic doctor, Dr. John Rock, and he wanted the church to accept his invention. And so when he was testing it, he realized that women who go on the pill never have a period. And he realized that's not going to seem natural. So if we're going to get the church to approve this, we want it to appear more natural. And women aren't going to like it if it doesn't feel natural and they're not having a period. Because what happens is when she goes on the pill, she ingests the chemicals, they dissolve in the stomach. They enter the woman's bloodstream. The blood takes the synthetic sex hormones into the woman's brain, telling her pituitary gland, you are pregnant. That sends a signal to her ovaries to essentially shut them off. But the problem is, if her brain is being told she's pregnant all month, she's not going to have a period. So the doctor said, well, here's what we should do. Give the woman 3 or so weeks of synthetic sex hormones so she thinks she's pregnant like 3 weeks out of the month, and then give her nothing in the rest of the pills. Make them sugar blank placebo pills. So essentially, her brain will think she's having a miscarriage. She'll have a withdrawal bleed. She'll think that's just basically a period. And then at the end of the month, she'll go back on her synthetic pregnancy the next month. So a woman on the pill, her brain literally thinks she is pregnant and having a miscarriage 12 times a year, back and forth, back and forth. And they say, well, it's regulating your cycle. This is not regulating a woman's cycle. A woman has a right to know how these things work, but they're not being told these things. Now, Paul VI, when all this stuff was happening, released this little bomb on the church in 1968, 50 years ago. And this thing was not received well in the church or the world, largely because nobody actually read it. If they read it, they'd see the wisdom in this thing. And in the 17th chapter, he tells us what's about to happen. He says, if contraception becomes the norm, here's what's going to happen in civilization. And you can just check off the boxes. He said, let them consider, first of all, how wide and easy a road would be opened up towards marital infidelity. Meaning, if I'm sleeping with someone other than my wife and I know my mistress could get pregnant, that's a big deterrent against having an affair. I mean, not for me, because I have obviously more important reasons to be faithful to my wife, but give a guy a condom, and then it's like, well, wait a minute, that's something I can get away with a little bit more. And they said, also, you'll have a general lowering of morality. He said, not a lot of experience is needed to know that especially men, and the young men, who are really vulnerable on this point, need to have encouragement to be faithful to the moral law. So they may not be offered some easy way of eluding its observance. And he said it's also to be feared that man, getting used to contraceptive practices, will begin to see woman as essentially, not for her physical and psychological well-being, care for her that, will come to the point of considering her as a mere instrument of selfish enjoyment and no longer as his respected and beloved companion. Check. He goes on. He says, consider how dangerous it's going to be when governments begin using contraceptives in terms of their planning population programs and what they're going to impose on the general public. I saw this in the Philippines. I was over there after a week of speaking. We're driving to the airport, and I asked the host, could we swing by the cathedral? I'd just like to make a visit there to the tabernacle before I fly home. We pull up to the bishop's residence, and we're trying to get near the parking lot, but the street is full of all these poor people laying down in the street in front of the bishop's residence. And I'm thinking, like, what is going on here? And then the poor people stand up and they hold up signs. We want abortion. We want contraception. We want the pill. We want the condom. And I'm watching this and I'm like, I know the poor. I've never seen the poor clamoring for abortion and family planning because the poor have enough wisdom to know that their greatest wealth is their families. And I asked the host, what is happening? I've never seen this before. And he said, no, it's not the poor that want the contraceptives. He said, you see those three people with those shirts on? Those are the family planning advocates that have come from overseas with their public policies. They go into the poorest parts of the Philippines, and they tell the poor people, come with us, hold our signs when we tell you to hold them, march when we tell you to march, and we will feed you a luncheon with all kinds of food after the parade. And so these illiterate poor people come, and then they call the news crews and the media in to film the poor people demanding contraception in front of the bishop's residence. Paul VI knew what was coming, and he foretold all of these things, but he only hit the tip of the iceberg. He couldn't even see the physical fallout of the pill. For example, when a woman takes hormonal contraceptives, her body experiences, and this is from the contraceptive textbook, it says more than 150 physiological changes in her body just by going on the pill. From head to toe, things change. For example, women on the birth control pill, I saw in this Journal of Ophthalmology, women on the pill blink 32% more often than women not on the pill. I mentioned this at a high school assembly once, and some girls were like, look, she's on the pill. And the other girl's like, no, I'm not. Cut it out. Stop it, guys. Stop it. So, this ties in with why women complain that when they go on the pill, their contact lenses aren't as comfortable. Well, why not? Because the birth control pill steepens the cornea of your eye and dehydrates it as well. That's why contact lenses don't fit or feel as comfortable once you go on the pill. Well, this is just the eye. Start to move through the whole body. The link to breast cancer in the pill. It's constantly, oh, that's not true, that's not true. You know who says it's true? The United Nations, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, World Health Organization, considers it a class 1 carcinogen. Companies that make the birth control pill openly admit it's linked to breast cancer. But they try to just say, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. If you don't like the pill, just take the shot. Oh, the shot. Depo-Provera, company that makes that, has been sued for more than $700 million because it thins out the girl's bones. There's 20-year-old university students in the States who now have the bones of a 60-year-old woman in their body because they took Depo for too many years as a teenager. In California, if you're a child molester or a rapist, you know what they do? Put you in prison where you belong. They punish you when you're there. According to the California Department of Corrections website, sex offenders in California now are to be punished by Depo-Provera treatment, and the inmate shall continue getting injections till the treatment is no longer necessary. They inject child molesters with girls' birth control. Why? It'll reduce his desire for sex. But you know who they won't give it to now are the dogs. Veterinarians refuse to. They said that is not safe enough for our house pets. But they'll give it to any girl for birth control. They say, look, if you don't want the shot, just take the patch or just take the implant. Implanon, it's a plastic stick about this long, thin like a matchstick. They just cut the girl's arm open, slide it under your skin, sew it shut. It sinks hormones so you don't get pregnant. If you're interested in that, you just make sure to read the fine print where it says, ladies on Implanon, call your doctor right away. If you start coughing up blood, you go completely blind or unconscious. It's like, what? How is she supposed to make the phone call? It's like, has anyone seen my cell phone around here? Coughing up blood. What was so wrong with her fertility to begin with? Her fertility is a gift. It's not some disease. But this is just the beginning of the litany. This study came out and asked, can taking the pill dull a woman's desire forever? They found out that when women go on the pill, their sex drive goes down. That's a pretty well-known phenomenon. And why does this happen? Because going on the pill increases the woman's SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin. Now, when that goes up, her level of testosterone goes down, which lowers her sex drive. But what they're finding now is when she goes off the pill, the SHBG level never goes back completely to normal. And this study said there is a possibility that it's imprinting a woman for the rest of her life. We don't know what we're tinkering here with, not only with our own physiology, but with the ecosystem in general. I don't know if you've seen these studies coming out now that when a woman uses the pill, look, water filter treatment plants were never created to filter out synthetic sex hormones from a person's urine. And so what's happening all over North America right now is that when you have a nation of 300 million people, many of whom on the birth control pill, and the hormones enter into the water system through the filter for the water treatment plant. The water goes downstream from these water filter treatment plants, and here's what's happening in the ecosystem. They're studying the mammals and in the wildlife north of the or upstream from the water treatment plants, and then they study the mammals and the fish and the otters and everything downstream from the water treatment plants. And here's what they're finding. They said birth control may be harming the state's salmon. This is from the Seattle Post. Birth control pills can curb the reproduction of more than just women taking them. In frogs, river otters, and fish, scientists are finding the presence of female hormones making the male species less male. In Colorado, they said we had 123 trout that we captured downstream from the treatment plant. 101 were female, 12 were male, and 10 were strange intersex fish with male and female features. It said, one scientist said, this is the first thing that I have seen that as a scientist really scares me. Up in Washington, estrogen is now bending the gender of male fish. In a Canadian study, they found there's male fish that have eggs in their testes. They're having hermaphrodite animals downstream from the water treatment plants. And one of the environmentalists was asked, well, what are you going to do about this? Are you going to curb the use of contraceptives for the sake of the environment? You know what he had to say? He said, look, nobody needs to think about cutting back on birth control for the creek's sake. That's getting into the bedroom, and I'm not going there. So basically just throw those fish under the bus. And it goes on, and they said, look, yeah, it's going to have some impact on the environment, but they said, look, it's not as bad as the impact your kid could have on the environment. It said, look, no matter what type you choose of birth control, it is guaranteed to have less of an impact on the environment than an unwitting creation of a fossil fuel-burning, diaper-wearing copy of yourself. It says, since an unwanted baby will be a massive carbon emitter. I don't know about you, but I have 7 carbon emitters at home, and they're awesome, all right? And so... But what's so fascinating to me about all this stuff, we live in this culture that's so green, so organic. Oh, green hairspray, organic baby food, organic this, organic that. But then when it comes to our sexuality, we are so eager to make this artificial. Why? Well, if you think about why do we have contraception, it's not to prevent pregnancy. We already had something that could do that. It was called abstinence. Contraception was not prevented to prevent pregnancy. Contraception was invented to prevent the need for abstinence. That's why it was created, by our desire not to have sexual self-control. And what's curious to me is there's always people saying, oh, come on, relax, man, sex is natural. Let people look at porn. Sex is natural. I can sleep with my girlfriend. Sex is natural. What I would say is, okay, why don't you have natural sex then? No laptop, no barrier, no hormones, just one man and one woman. Have natural sex. Oh, hey, that's kind of irresponsible, don't you think? Well, how come the people who clamor the most for how natural sex is are actually the people who are least likely to actually have natural sex? And some people say, well, okay, fine, hormones, bad, whatever. Come on, what about the condom? I mean, really, what could be so harmful to a woman's body or the environment with just using a condom? Look, we all know from 7th grade biology, one sperm gets a girl pregnant, okay? What happens to the other hundreds of millions of sperm introduced to a woman through a single act of intercourse? Now, it used to be believed that if they did not fertilize the egg, they served no biological purpose. They found that this is actually not true. In a man's seminal fluid are dozens of biological ingredients that enter the woman's body, bloodstream, and even brain. Within hours of intercourse, his hormones are throughout her entire body. And they do a number of things. One, after intercourse, the woman's white blood cells will scour the surface of her cervix, bringing the man's sperm proteins and DNA inside her body to her lymph nodes, where her immune system will learn the genetic type of that man's sperm and become accustomed to it, to develop what they say, a gradual tolerance to the antigens on the male semen. So if she does become pregnant from this man, Her womb will actually recognize the genetic type of baby that attaches to the womb with the type of sperm that had nourished the uterus, and it makes for an easier pregnancy. If the woman is deprived of the seminal nourishment by means of a barrier method of contraception, when she does become pregnant, they said she's more than twice as likely to suffer preeclampsia, which is an elevated blood pressure risk during childbirth. Now, this I was reading out of the Journal of the American Medical Association. And I was sitting on an airplane typing this up in a book that I was writing. A woman on the airplane next to me leans over and she says, "Hi, what are you writing about?" I'm like, I said, "This is an epidemiologic study of contraception and preeclampsia." And I kind of explained it to her, and she said, "That's really neat." And I said, "Yeah, look at this, Kay, look at that." And she says, "Can I read that?" And I'm sure I explained it to her. And she said, "This is amazing." She said, "You know what? My husband and I," she said, "I know I just met you, but I feel like I know you so well." She said, "You know what? My husband and I have been married for 10 years, and we've used the condom between all 3 of our kids." And she said, "Every single pregnancy I had preeclampsia. How come they didn't teach this to us in marriage preparation class?" And the best line in the whole study is where it actually says that if a man is not using a condom, they are having a protective sexual intercourse because he's protecting the woman with the beneficial effects of his semen. And this article about conception was published on December 8th, which I kind of like because that happens to be the Feast of the Immaculate Conception in the church. So I always like when they revolve their studies around our liturgical calendar. But it's beautiful, the way that God designed a man's body to work with the woman's. And some people think, okay, fine, but if you're not using that, I mean, what are you left with? I mean, natural family planning, I mean, really, how effective is that? And what does that entail? NFP does involve times of abstinence, where you learn the woman's fertility, you chart her cycle, and you abstain from sex on the particular days of the month in which she could become pregnant. Now, I give talks to engaged couples on this, and they don't know anything about NFP, so you can really have a lot of fun with them. And so I'll say, now, so for most of you engaged couples, what this means is you'll need to be abstinent for about 27 days of every month. And the guys are like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Just kidding." Chastity speakers have fun. But no, it's not 27 days. I said, look, couples who use NFP have intercourse, studies show, as often as those who contracept. They simply time it differently. And in the end, they have much more intercourse because they have a divorce rate under 4%. The church is on to something here. Now, when some people hear, wait, abstinence in marriage? I don't want to hear anything else. But the fact is, a friend of mine, he and his wife couldn't have kids. They had all these fertility problems, and they go to this fertility doctor. And the doctor said, okay, I need to assess your wife's fertility condition. To do this, I need to chart her reproductive cycle. To do that, precisely, I need the both of you to be abstinent for 30 days. And the wife's like, okay. And the husband said, what? And the doctor said, no, I need you guys just to be abstinent for 30 days. And my friend said, does it need to be 30 consecutive days? And the doctor's like, yes, just 30 days. What don't you get? Now, this was a Catholic hospital, okay? The nurse in attendance was a religious sister, a 70-year-old celibate woman. And so when my friend gasped, a month? The nun looked at him and she said, you'll be all right. And, yeah. You realize he's going to be okay. He's not going to have abstinence conniption fits, and they were okay, and they were able to conceive and have a family. But to me, what's interesting, if you want to really know, well, how good's a form of family planning, one thing to look at is how happy are the people who are using it. So textbooks of contraceptive practice will show you the continuation rates of different forms of family planning. And here they are. Spermicide, 42% of people who use it this year will be using it next year. Condom, 53, shot, 56, diaphragm, 57, pill, 68, patch, 68, natural family planning, 89%. It has the highest rate of continuation of any reversible form of contraceptive. Now, why? Why are couples sticking with this? Well, it has benefits that contraception does not have. It has relational benefits. One woman told me after she and her partner switched from contraceptives to natural family planning in their marriage, she said, you know what? I now know what the true meaning of the word intimate is. Now, when was the last time you heard that enthusiasm with contraception? Well, now we switch to the diaphragm. I really know the meaning of intimacy. The enthusiasm has never been there. Why? Because no woman wants to contracept. Yeah, she might want to have intercourse without having babies, but she's never wanted to be at war with her own body in order to accomplish this. And so the fact is, we want this real intimacy. I saw a condom advertisement that said, our condom latex is 0.1 millimeter thinner than any other brand. Greater intimacy. And I'm thinking, if you want to build intimacy with the woman, switching condom brands is probably not the main thing you need to be looking at here. But they're onto something here that in a certain sense, the rejection of the body is a rejection of the person. There's a barrier here that just doesn't make sense. Because the language of making love is, I give myself completely to you. I'm all yours. But the language of contraception is, I give myself totally to you, but I'm going to kill any of your sperm that come my way. I want to give myself totally to you, but let me get my barrier in place. Like, is this making love or making war? Like, which is it? And so we know something's off in the language that's being spoken. But I find with natural family planning, it just, as a man, I think it makes a man a better lover. Now, why? Because with natural family planning, you learn to express love in non-sexual ways, and the intimacy deepens from that. I remember after one chastity talk I gave at a high school, this boy came up with his girlfriend, and he's like, yeah, look, your talk was awesome. Look, my girlfriend and I, we've been having sex and everything, and we want to start over and not do this anymore. But he said, look, if we're not having sex, what are we supposed to do? And I said, exactly. And he's like, what do you mean exactly? And I said, go figure it out. Learn to express love in non-sexual ways. Learn friendship. Learn other forms of human intimacy. And so what you learn through this is that abstinence is an expression of love. We're supposed to learn this as singles. That if I'm not sleeping with my girlfriend tonight, it's not because I don't love her. It's because I love her so much that her abstinence tonight is a greater expression of love than making love, because I'm doing what's best for my beloved and not just what feels good in the moment. So my abstinence is an expression of love. And then look what happens when you bring this into marriage. The understanding that not every kiss needs to lead to the bedroom. That my abstinence tonight, 4,000 miles away from my wife, my abstinence tonight is an expression of love. If I get home tomorrow night and she's exhausted from dealing with the kids, again, the abstinence can be an expression of love. Because as men, this is harder for us to grasp because, look, we don't get a lot of physical contact as guys as it is. I mean, how much you're at work, you might shake someone's hand. That could be as much as you touch someone the entire day. Now, if the woman happens to be, let's say, a stay-at-home mom, she could be suffocated by touch by 9 o'clock in the morning from the kids. I remember one day I was sleeping. It was like 5 in the morning. I felt this pressure like on my face. I'm like, what is this? And I look up, and my daughter is standing on my face. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she looks at me, and she's like, oh, did I wake you up? Let's have a tea party with dinosaurs. And I'm like, it's 5 in the morning. And this is 5 a.m. Fast forward to 5 in the evening. A wife at home suffocated by touch. Maybe the greatest form of intimacy a man could give her that at that point of day is an hour of free time. This is the way to build intimacy, to realize it's not about what happens simply in the bedroom. And as a result, these couples have this low divorce rate. And it's not simply because, they're using this type of family planning. No, couples who use NFP typically are deeply religious. They take their marital vows very seriously. But the same things you need for NFP, the same virtues, are the same virtues that hold a marriage together. That patience, that sacrifice, that self-control, it leads you to a stronger marriage. Now, the fact is, though, NFP does create some conflict sometimes, because one of the purposes of marriage is the sanctification of the spouses. And so what happens in marriage, your faults will often come to the surface like oil and water, because prior to marriage, you typically think, well, I'm a pretty good guy. I'm a rather good catch. I'm patient. I'm forgiving. I'm rather selfless. And then you get married, you're like, I'm a jerk. God's doing what he wants the sacrament to be doing. But what happens sometimes in the area of natural family planning is it often will bring to the surface an incomplete development of that virtue of chastity, where it's like, well, wait a minute, this is really hard. I thought like you get married and like anything goes, chastity until marriage, without realizing, no. This is a virtue we need to be practicing with our sexuality in marriage. And I would even argue that chastity in marriage, the proper use of God's plan for sex, can be more of a challenge than chastity prior to marriage. But God has given us the graces of the sacrament to be able to live this out. So not only do you get the relational benefits, you get the physical benefits of NFP. NFP. One, you don't have to worry about all the side effects. Second benefit, if you do want to conceive, you have a reproductive chart that can pinpoint the most likely time for you to conceive if it is time to have a family for you guys. Another thing you get is the woman's reproductive health chart in your hands. You have her reproductive health right in your hands. In fact, I knew a couple had a big conversion, stopped using the condom, started using NFP, started charting the cycle. Now the husband, which is cool with NFP, learns it with the wife. It's not just, oh, you take your pill. We learn the cycle together. Now this husband was charting the wife's cycle with her, and he noticed, he said, look, that doesn't look right. What's happening at this time of the month? That wasn't what they showed us in class. Let's talk to your doctor. So they went to the doctor. Doctor looked at the charts, and he said, yep, there's something wrong here with the thyroid. We need to look at this right away. They brought her to the hospital. Turned out she had a cancerous tumor on her thyroid. They operated immediately, and they saved the woman's life because they were charting with natural family planning. If these symptoms were masked under contraceptives, they would not have received this blessing. And so for me as a husband, if you just tell me, look, this is good for your wife's body, it's good for her soul, okay, that's it. Like, I don't really need the theology and philosophy. If it's good for my bride, then that's just the way we're going to go. And is it going to be a little sacrifice? Well, that's okay. Because I think as men, like, we want to look like a knight, but we don't often really want to bleed like one. But here, I think with NFP, is God's inviting us. Yeah, come and sacrifice. And now you'll notice, though, all the things I've said about NFP, this is not why it's immoral. Or contraception is immoral versus NFP, because contraception is not wrong because it's artificial. I mean, contact lenses are artificial. The church isn't opposed to contact lenses, releasing encyclicals against that. Prosthetic limbs, all this is artificial. The church is not opposed to contraception because it's artificial. The church is opposed to it because it's contraceptive. It violates the purpose and the meaning of our human sexuality. And so it not only violates the purpose, babies and bonding, and some people will say, well, come on, how come you just can't have some bonding without having to worry about all the babies? I mean, can't you just have one without the other? Imagine if we tried the other thing. Imagine one guy who said, look, I don't want bonding with this woman, I just want babies. And so what we're going to do is we'll exchange the marital act, but at this time I will look away from you because I don't want to have any emotional entanglement with you because I want to use you as an incubator for my offspring. You think, this guy's a creep. You'd realize immediately something's very off here because what God has joined, babies and bonding, we're not supposed to split. It also violates the meaning of the sexuality, the wedding vows made flesh. We welcome children, but then we deliberately contracept the act of intercourse. And some people say, well, can't you just be generally open to life? I mean, does every single act have to be open to life? Try that with the other parts of the wedding vows. I mean, faithful, do I have to be faithful every time I have intercourse? I mean, can't it be like 99% faithful? It's like, no, it's 100% or not. But John Paul II gave us a new insight on this, the immorality of contraception. He said it's not just because it's opposed to babies and bonding and against the marital act. John Paul II pointed out it is against the very nature of the human person. Because you are created in the image and likeness of love, of a communion of life-giving love. Contraception isn't simply what we shouldn't do. Contraception is not who we are. We are created in the image of a life-giving love, of the Blessed Trinity. Contraception simply strikes at the core against who we are as human persons. And some people say, well, look, theology is great, but basically isn't NFP the same thing as contraception? You're just controlling births, aren't you? You're just not calling it birth control. I mean, what's the real big difference here? It's basically the same end result. One analogy that's helpful to understand this, to have something be truly moral, you need both the motive and the means, in the end, to be moral. And so imagine two women. They both wanted a slim figure. So one engaged in bulimia. She binged on food and then she purged out its effects and she maintained a slim figure. Another woman, instead of bulimia, chose to diet and to exercise and practices temperance. Instead of binging on the food and purging it, she practiced self-restraint. This is very similar to natural family planning and contraception, where one binges on the sexual pleasure and then purges out the life-giving effects, whereas natural family planning practices a bit of temperance. And, I'll grant you, it is difficult. And people say, but really, come on, isn't it basically the same thing at the end of the day? Well, look, if contraception is the same thing as NFP, well, then just use NFP. And people say, well, that's a big difference, though. Well, if there's a big difference in the method, there's probably perhaps a big difference in the means. Because look, if NFP is contraceptive, then at what point does the NFP couple contracept? Are they contracepting by having intercourse? They're not doing anything. Are they contracepting by being abstinent? Well, no, and that's not an act of contraception. You could have a greedy mentality behind it of like, we don't want to have kids because I want to have 5 boats and 3 cars. We could have a contraceptive, selfish mentality behind it and use it in a contraceptive way, but the church invites us to really discern and be generous because, the whole debate is not good Catholics use contraception or good Catholics use NFP, bad Catholics use contraception. No, that's not it. Good Catholics are open to receiving children as the supreme gift of marriage. And if we can't have kids right now for whatever a sufficient reason, then we can fall back on NFP as a way to plan the family. The default position is openness to life. Some couples say, well, we want to get married, but we don't want to have kids for a couple of years. We just really want to spend some time to get to know each other. Oh, you want to get to know each other? Why don't you have kids? You're going to get to know each other real good if you have some kids, if that's what you want. And so the fact is, the church calls children the supreme gift of marriage. Imagine if after your wedding, you get to the reception, there's all these presents, and there's this giant one, and it says the supreme gift of marriage. You'd be like, we'll get to that in 5 years. That's when we'll open up that one. No, you'd want to open up this gift. But the fact is, let's just be honest. We've been raised, not just raised, we've been marinated in a contraceptive culture since the day we came out of the wombs ourselves. It's all contraceptive. In fact, when my wife and I started to have kids, people right away well, you're done, right? You're finished. I mean, yeah, you got your boys. You just had a girl, so you've got the girl, you got the boys. You guys are done, right? Yes, I've collected all of the genders. I can stop procreating now. It's like, what are you talking about? I mean, my goodness. In fact, where are people getting this from? I'll tell you where we're getting it from. The media. Look at this. MSN online had an article entitled 10 Reasons You Should Never Have Kids. Now, you've written a dumb article when if everyone agreed with you, humanity would cease to exist, okay? That's a pretty good clue. Bad article. Let's hear out the author, though. Okay, why should you never have kids? Well, the fact is, if you have kids, a large part of your life will be focused on your relationship with your child rather than yourself. I hate to lose my relationship with myself. It says, look, if you don't have kids, you won't be exposed to germs your kids bring home from daycare. It says, look, microbes are easily transmitted, and your kid brings that home from daycare, you could get aches, pains, flu-like symptoms, and diarrhea. That's true. My kids bring home like Ebola in their lunchbox. Who cares, man? Builds your immune system. And the next one says, look, if you don't have kids, you'll spare yourself from back pain from lifting and carrying babies. It says lifting a baby out of a car seat and into a supermarket cart can tax your core muscles and lead to back pain and injuries over time. Like, do what? If you don't have kids, you won't lift anything more than 12 pounds till you're dead? And then it says, if you don't have kids, you can be alone anytime you want. If you don't have time to yourself, you'll end up losing yourself. Not having kids mean you won't lose yourself. You can play tennis, do yoga, or whatever you want all the time. Now, if this weren't so depressing, it'd be hilarious. This is the complete inversion of the church's teachings on human freedom. Man can only find himself in the fullest giving of himself. You do not lose yourself by committing and giving yourself. You're not enslaved by commitment. You know what enslaves mankind is the fear of commitment and giving ourselves. That is the slavery we need to avoid. Freedom does not exist in an end of itself. Freedom exists for the sake of love. It exists to be given away. And when we don't trust God sometimes with our family, we punish ourselves by not getting the blessings he wanted to give us. I know of one married couple, they're about 48 years old, sitting at the dinner table, they're teenage kids, just 2 boys, and halfway through the dinner, the mom starts crying. And the husband's like, honey, you doing okay? And she says, let's talk later. And they're like, okay, all right. And they finished dinner. That night he came to his wife, like, honey, what was going on there at the dinner table? And she said to him, well, I was just looking at the table, the 2 kids we had, and I saw the empty chair there, and I knew somebody was missing. And I know why they're missing, because we contracepted for 10 years in our marriage, and we can't get that opportunity back. And this poor woman knew that she hadn't been open to that gift of life, and as a result, she just had to entrust God with her past and say, God, I trust you. This hurts, but I'm going to trust you. And she was left with that. Now, my grandfather, he was kind of the other side of the spectrum. He and his wife married for 65 years. They had 10 kids, and their names were Joseph and Mary, okay? It doesn't get much better than that. And now, he passed away back in September, and he went through some health issues. He fell down, had a big fall, and the ambulance came to pick him up. And, he's, I don't know, almost 90 years old, and they're putting him in the ambulance, and the nurses are trying to, just check his awareness, okay, are you with us? You with us? What's your name? What's your name? He said, Joseph. Okay, Joseph, do you have any children? And he said, yes. How many children do you have? And his kids were there, and he said, I have 2. Too many. But he was clearly kidding. He didn't have too many. Every one of those was such a gift. And are they expensive? The world, every child costs $4.5 billion. Yeah, it's ridiculous. They're the greatest wealth that we could ask for. Their love is so genuine. My little girl once was at the grocery store. She saw these little bouquet of carnation flowers. And she grabbed them and she said to my wife, Mom, can I buy these for Daddy? Can I please buy these? Can you buy them for Daddy? I love him so much. And so my wife buys her the flowers, and she comes home and gives me this bouquet. And I kept it there in my office, just cherished it. Forever I had this. And my wife's like, you got to throw them away. There's mold crawling up the stems. And I'm like, I'll never throw them away. And I finally parted with them. But I kept one, and I clipped it, and I dried it out. And I said, you know what? One day, I'm going to wear that as a corsage on my lapel on the day that she enters the cloistered convent as a religious sister and makes her final professions and vows. Right there. Yep. Now, but no. She doesn't have to become a cloistered nun, okay? No. She could join whatever religious order she wants as long as they have the full habit, okay? No, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to be some freak. No. Look, no, on the record, she does not have to become a nun. As long as she meets a man who loves her more than Jesus Christ, she's more than likely to marry him instead. So, but in the end, the reality that I think doesn't get spoken enough about is that it's hard. NFP is difficult. People often get sold NFP. Oh, it's the best thing ever. It's like going from honeymoon back to engagement, and it just deepens intimacy. But you know what? It's also a pain in the neck. And it's also a really big sacrifice. Contraception, I cannot argue the point. It would be easier. It would be more convenient. But at some point in our life, we really have to ask myself, what matters more, my convenience or my Catholic faith? Because sometimes, I'll be frank, you just can't have both of them. This is Christianity that we're talking about. If you take the cross out of Christianity, it ceases to be what it is. It's going to be hard. Jesus had hard sayings, many of them. The teaching on the Eucharist. They said, this is a hard saying. His teaching on divorce and remarriage. When he told the apostles they could not remarry after getting divorced, do you know what they say? They said, this is a hard saying. They said, well, what's the point of getting married then if you can't get divorced? I mean, that was their answer to him on this whole thing. You look at the hardness of their hearts. Yeah, Jesus had some hard sayings sometimes, but that's okay. Why, though? Why does this have to be hard like this? Why is it hard not to have kids? Why is it easier just that they come into existence? You know why? Because Jesus really loves kids. I think that's really why. The movie came out in the States called Heaven is for Real. It was this Protestant movie of this kid that apparently died, went up to heaven, and then came back down and told everybody how it was. Now, I don't know about the validity of the locutions and all that, but it doesn't matter. In the story, he goes up to heaven, he comes back, and he tells his mom, oh, I didn't know I had a sister. And they're like, whoa, you're right. We didn't tell you about the miscarriage. And I saw my aunt there. And he described what she looked like perfectly. And then he was one day having a talk with his dad, and he said, Dad, you know what? Jesus really likes children. And the dad's like, I know, like he really likes children. And the kid's like, no, Dad. Jesus really loves children. And the dad's like, oh, I know. The kid's like, no, Dad, you don't understand. Jesus really loves the children. And the father just fell silent because he realized he did not grasp the depth of love which was Christ welcomes children. That's why he said that if you so much as welcome a child in my name, you welcome me. And this applies also to our marriage, because if we say yes to one single child, do you realize we're not simply saying yes to one? You could be saying yes to your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, generations, and hundreds of thousands potentially of descendants that one day could populate the very beatific vision of heaven if I had not said yes to that one life. Jesus, God, can see far into eternity. We can only see right now. Well, this is hard. I'm up all night, kids thrown up. This is so difficult. I'm sleep deprived. But God can see so far beyond these little crosses to the glory that he wants to bring us and our children to. So the question comes just, do we trust him? Are we ready to ask him this very daring question in our sexuality? That God, do I trust you when it comes to my sexuality, with my girlfriend, with my wife? Do I really trust you, or do I just grasp? Because at the kitchen table, we pray, bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts. Okay, he's the Lord of the kitchen table, but is he the Lord in the bedroom? Do we really trust him there? And when you step back and you look at the whole picture of what we discussed tonight, the church's teachings, yeah, it's true, and it's good, but most of all, it's beautiful. Because what NFP taught me is my wife's body, do you know what? It's perfect. She doesn't need shots. She doesn't need pills. She doesn't need barriers. She doesn't need that. You know what my wife's body needs? Is to be understood. Because if we can understand her body, then instead of suppressing her body with chemicals to conform to our desires, we conform our desires to the perfect way that her body has already been created. This, my friends, is true sexual liberation. God bless you, and thank you for coming tonight.